Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Kent Hovind. I taught high school science for 15 years. Tonight we're going to cover our videotape number 3 is all about dinosaurs. Where do they fit into the Bible? This fellow from National Geographic says, no human being has ever seen a live dinosaur. Well, now hold on a minute. Does he know that, or does he think that? In order to know that, wouldn't he have to know everybody that ever lived? Did he talk to you before he said that? No, he didn't talk to me. I bet he didn't talk to the folks that lived 500 years ago either, did he? You can't just make that and call it a scientific statement. No human being has ever seen a dinosaur. That's his opinion, but that's certainly not a scientific statement. See, the Bible says in Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And it says in Exodus chapter 20, in 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is. Which means Adam must have seen dinosaurs. If he made everything in 6 days, I believe that means he made everything in 6 days, just like he said he did. And in seminar part 2, we talked about the firmament that was above the atmosphere. In Genesis 1:6, it says, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. When God first made the earth, there was a canopy of water above the firmament, above the atmosphere. That could have been a canopy of ice, 8 or 10 or 20 inches thick, I don't know. I don't think all the rain for the flood came from the canopy. I mean, most of the water for the flood came from inside the earth. The fountains of the deep broke open. That's where most of the flood water came from. It only rained 40 days, but the water kept coming up for 150 days. So it didn't all come from, from the rain. But this canopy of water overhead is probably what explains why they lived so long before the flood, over 900 years, and why we don't live to be 900 years old today. That canopy is one of several factors that probably influenced their great longevity. So from the creation up until the flood, things were very different. The people lived to be more than 900 years old. You could learn a lot in 900 years. Adam spoke every language in the world. Well, there was only one, but he spoke it. Okay. Now during this time, something very strange would happen to the reptiles, because reptiles never stop growing. People stop growing. When you're 16 or 18 years old, you're going to quit growing, at least vertically. Reptiles never stop growing. So before the flood came, when the reptiles lived to be 900 years old, they would get to be really big. Dinosaurs were just big lizards that lived with Adam and Eve before the flood came. They did not live millions of years ago. And then Noah took them on the ark. People say, dinosaurs on the ark, they're kind of big, aren't they? Well, the big ones were big, but the little ones were little. And Noah was 600 years old when he built that boat. I bet he was smart enough to figure out, you don't have to bring the biggest ones you can find. Bring 2 babies. Just be sure to get a pink one and a blue one. That'll be important later. There are all sorts of reasons for bringing babies. They're smaller, obviously. Did you know the biggest dinosaur egg ever found is smaller than a football? So you can get an awfully big dinosaur from a pretty small egg, okay? Secondly, they weigh less, they eat less, they sleep a lot more, they're tougher. Did you know kids fall down and bounce and get up and keep running? Adults fall down and break or lay there for a while. So it makes common sense to bring babies, since they would be more durable for a journey on the ark in case it gets rough once in a while. Now, some of the scoffers have said, man, if it was stormy seas for a whole year, it'd kill everybody on the ark. The Bible doesn't say it was stormy seas for a whole year. Noah was in the ark for a year. He hit bottom in the 7th month. He didn't get out for 6 more months. We cover that on video number 6, why he didn't get out. But there can be storms going on in the world right now. And it doesn't affect us right here, does it? Could be a storm over in India. We don't feel the weather pattern changes. So I think Noah was in the ark and God watched over that whole situation. But after the flood, the dinosaurs, the babies, would live longer to produce more offspring, and that's why he brought them. Why on earth would you bring big elephants or big giraffes? Just bring 2 babies. And he only had to bring 2 of every sort, not 2 of every species. So that's where people get all confused about this. God told Noah to bring them after their kind, after their kind, after their kind, 2 of every sort. 7 of some, of course. Just 2 generic animals of each kind, and only those in whose nostrils was the breath of life, and only those on dry land. Noah didn't have to bring any fish. They had plenty of water outside. And he didn't have to bring any bugs, by the way, because bugs don't have nostrils. They breathe through their skin, through spiracles. And he brought just 2 of the generic dog kind, like our dog Nicky. Nicky was a Canardly. because you can already tell what kind he was. Okay? That's the generic dog there, Nicky. Probably the horse and the zebra had a common ancestor. I wouldn't argue about that, but it looked like a horse. So there's been a lot of variations within the kind since the flood, but that's not evolution. It's just a variation of the same kind of animal. Skeptics will say, how did he fit those millions of animals onto the ark? Well, in the first place, he only brought land animals. Okay, that greatly limits the number. He could eliminate the bugs. That really, really limits the number. Only bring babies. That's common sense. Bring 2 of each kind, not every single variety. Did you know there's only about 8,000 basic kinds of animals in the world? Adam could name 8,000 kinds of animals in a couple hours. People say, how did one man name all those animals in one day? Well, they start with the assumption that they have to have millions of names. That's a false assumption. They start with the assumption that Adam is as dumb as the average person today. Adam came pre-programmed straight from the hand of God. I mean, he could walk, talk, and get married first day. Right? Okay. He was pre-programmed, fully loaded computer. Okay. And how big was the ark anyway? You know, it beats what the evolutionists believe. They believe 20 billion years ago there was a big bang where nothing exploded and produced everything. And then 4.6 billion years ago the earth cooled down and it rained on the rocks for millions of years. Yes, boys and girls, it took a long time for the earth to cool down, but the earth was hot and there were large pools of bubbling lava. This is what the textbooks teach the kids today in school, right? Some of you face this stuff today, right? And oceans formed as it rained on the rocks for millions of years. Yes, boys and girls, millions of years of torrential rains created the oceans. And swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. Oh, I guess it is. It's totally stopped. That's how slow it is. This textbook says the first self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. Was your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa soup? I don't think so, no. So according to the Big Bang Theory, 20 billion years ago, nothing exploded and produced everything. And 4.6 billion years ago, the earth cooled down, it rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. One skeptic said to me one time, he said, Hovind, did you realize there are hundreds of kinds of dogs in the world? I said, yes, sir, you're right about that. He said, do you think all those dogs came from just 2 dogs on Noah's Ark? I said, sir, would you look at what you believe? You believe all the dogs in the world came from a rock. That would take an awful lot of faith, I would say. Here's the evolutionist life verse, saying to a stock, thou art my father, and to a stone thou hast brought me forth. I found my daddy's life verse in the Bible. Matthew 17:15. Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and sore vexed. But anyway, the Bible says the earth was corrupt before God and filled with violence. Everything was corrupt. People were wicked. And the Lord said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark. And Noah said to the boys, hey boys, go for wood. We got to build a boat, quick. And so they went and got the wood, and he built this monster boat. After the flood was over, Noah's son Shem had a son and named him Arphaxad. Why would anybody name a kid Arphaxad? Can't you see that kid in kindergarten? What's your name, son? Arphaxad. Do you know how to spell it? No. Nobody does. But don't you think little Arphaxad was getting big enough one day? He's sitting on Grandpa Noah's lap, and he's looking around like kids do, and he says, hey, Grandpa, I have a question. How come we're the only people in the whole world? Where is everybody? Eventually, that thought's going to cross his mind, don't you think? I mean, after all, there weren't many people in those days. They had the whole world to themselves. And Grandpa Noah's going to tell the story to grandson Arphaxad about the flood. Actually, Noah's son Shem lived a long time after the flood. He lived long enough to tell the story firsthand to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God made sure there was one of his witnesses there. I was there kind of fella. You don't believe in the flood? Hey, let's go talk to Shem. He's still alive. And today, there are 270 surviving flood legends. The Hawaiian have a legend that says, long after the death of Kunihana, the first man, the world became a wicked, terrible place to live. There was one good man left. His name was Nu'u. He made a great canoe with a house on it and filled it with animals. The waters came up over all the earth and killed all the people. Only Nu'u and his family were saved. Interesting story. The Chinese have a legend called the Hiking Classic, probably one of the oldest stories in the world. The Hiking Classic says Fuhai is the father of the Chinese civilization. The story says Fuhai, his wife, 3 sons and 3 daughters escaped a great flood. He and his family were the only people alive on earth. After the flood, they repopulated the world. Interesting. Sounds kind of like the Bible story, doesn't it? The Toltec Indians in Mexico have a legend that says the first world lasted 1,716 years and was destroyed by a great flood. Only one family named Cox survived. Why would there be 270 flood legends? Well, I think it's because there was a flood. That's my theory. I mean, a worldwide flood, too. You have guys like Hugh Ross who go around saying, you know, it's just a local flood in the days of Noah. I said, Hugh, if it's just a local flood, why would God tell Noah to build that big boat, fill it full of animals, and stay on there for a year? Tell Noah to move. I can figure that out. Don't give me this local flood baloney. The Bible says the time before the flood was 1,656 years. The Toltec Indian legend says 1716. Pretty close for a legend 4,000 years old. And if you look at the country of Turkey today, you'll find on the far right-hand side a mountain called Mount Ararat. On a Turkish map, it's called No Ungumshi, which means Noah's big boat in Turkish. There's a sign, No Ungumshi, 5 kilometers this way. Everybody knows where it is. They just walk right up to it. See, the Bible says the ark rested in the 7th month upon the mountains of Ararat. It does not say it landed on Mount Ararat. It might have, I don't know. But the Bible says it landed in the mountains of Ararat. There are at least 4 theories about Noah's ark of what happened to it. Okay? One theory says they took it apart and used the lumber to build cities. And it doesn't even exist anymore. One theory says it rotted. It's gone. Okay? I mean, a wooden boat, 4,000 years old, it's a little, you know, I'd be skeptical of anything survived. The third theory says it's still on Mount Ararat, covered up in ice, and you only get to see it once in a while. And there have been a lot of expeditions that have gone up there, and they all come back and say, boy, we just almost found it. You know, send more money, we'll go look for it next year. And the fourth theory says it's down in the valley. It's a boat-shaped object. It is the same size as Noah's Ark would have been. It's 17 miles away from Mount Ararat. I knew Ron Wyatt real well. He was a good friend of mine. He died a couple years ago, but his website is wyattmuseum.com, and he and many other folks think that is Noah's Ark. They say it collapsed, you know, folded in after it got old and splayed out to the side. You know, ships kind of fold out to the side as they wear out. So it's much wider than it used to be. They found iron rivets all over that region. I've held them in my hand. They're in the museum up in just south of Nashville, Tennessee. If you come down that interstate, you can stop at the museum and see the iron rivets for yourself. The government of Turkey said this is Noah's Ark. They even built a visitor center. Now, Creation Magazine, good friends of mine, they have published some very negative articles saying it's not Noah's Ark. I've read both sides of the story, and I think it's still very much a possibility that that is indeed Noah's Ark, and I think they overlooked a couple things. But the Bible says the ark was 300 cubits long. A cubit is from your elbow to your fingertip. I'm 6'1", and my cubit is 21 inches. The standard Hebrew cubit is 18 inches. The Egyptian cubit was 20.6 inches, just a little bit shorter than mine. Now, since Moses went to school in Egypt, we could assume that he would use the Egyptian cubit in his writings. The boat-shaped object down in the valley is 515 feet long, which is exactly 300 Egyptian cubits. One of the people said, well, you know, anytime mud flows around an object, it makes that shape. That's just a mud flow. Yes, but when mud flows around an object, the round side is on the uphill side and the pointed side is on the downhill side, and this one is backwards. This is not a mud flow. Anyway, it's about 2/3 the size of the Titanic. In that region, they have so far found, I believe, 12 giant stones. These stones weigh 9,000 pounds, and they have holes drilled through the top. Apparently, this was to hold a rock, to hold a rope, to hang this rock over the side of the boat. It's what's called a drogue stone. The purpose of a drogue stone is to keep the boat stabilized in stormy weather. Sort of like a shock absorber to the water. You know, as the waves hit you, the boat slowly moves instead of, you know, violently reacting to the waves. It keeps you more stable with a bunch of rocks hanging all over the boat. Plus, if it really gets windy, the wind will turn the boat and you'll be perpendicular to the waves because the rocks are going to drag behind you, and now you can't capsize. One atheist wrote me a letter and said, Hovind, you're so stupid. Don't you know if he had rocks hanging all over the boat, it would slow him down? Well, he wasn't trying to go anywhere, you know. He's just trying to float. Of course it would slow them down, man. One atheist I debated, he's a former preacher turned atheist. He said, you can't have a boat that big because if you get over 300 feet long, when the waves come up, the boat bends in the middle and it breaks. Well, first place, a lot of people have built boats over 300 feet long. The Chinese had a bunch of them way over 300 feet long that sailed just fine. Secondly, Noah's Ark didn't have any masts with sails attached to them. It wasn't designed to sail. And the illustrations he uses are all masted ships. They had a six-master that was 300 and some feet long, and the wind would make it flex and twist, and the hull leaked continuously. Well, Noah's Ark didn't have any masts. Plus, if Noah's Ark had a moon pool, that would solve all the problems too. There are several ways to solve this problem. A moon pool is a hole in the floor with walls built up inside, and when you go over the waves, the water comes up and down inside that hole. And it acts like a giant piston, which pumps fresh air in and out of the boat every time you hit a wave. Remember what he had on board? You might actually pray for a good wave once in a while. Hey, Lord, we're about to feed the elephants. Would you send a little wave here, please? We need some help. So, what happened to the dinosaurs? I mean, if the Bible is true and dinosaurs were on the ark, what happened to them? That question of what happened to the dinosaurs is used in public schools all over the world to trigger kids to start a conversation about evolution, to teach them the evolution theory. And they'll tell the kids, maybe a meteor struck the Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago, made an iridium layer all over the world, and killed all the dinosaurs. I don't think so. This scientist from Indiana's got a neat theory. He says the dinosaurs killed themselves off with their own flatulence. The methane they produced caused the Earth's atmospheric temperature to warm up, creating a kind of greenhouse effect. This might have increased global warming to a point where the dinosaurs could not stand the heat. I just don't know what to say about a theory like that. Anyway, so what made the dinosaurs go extinct anyway? Hey, they are asking the wrong question. The question is not what made them go extinct. The question is, did they go extinct? After the dinosaurs got off the ark, they faced a very hostile climate. Things had changed. Remember, before the flood, the people lived to be 900. After the flood, it dropped off right away to 400, and then 200, and then 100. Probably, at least one of the factors was, the canopy that used to protect them was gone. It had rained for 40 days. And now with more radiation coming in, you get more mutations. You have more problems, which they probably would not have had before. Plus, your food is not getting the same nourishment that it used to have before the flood, so your food supply is being diminished in its quality. Probably several reasons, but I think dinosaurs had two basic problems after the flood. Number one, they faced major climate changes where they couldn't live as long, and so some of the big species simply went extinct. They couldn't survive. Second problem they had was probably worse. People were hunting them. In those days, they called them dragons. They would kill them for meat. There'd be a lot of hamburger in one brachiosaurus. You could feed the village for a while, couldn't you? They killed them because they were a menace or for medicine. You know, it's amazing how many ancient recipes for medicines call for dragon saliva or dragon bones to be ground up and put in these things. Just like it's, you know, just go out and get a dragon and put some of the bones. Just like it's normal. You know, everybody does that, don't you know? They used to call them dragons because the word dinosaur wasn't even invented till 1841. So all through history, they're known as dragons. The word dragon is found in the Bible 35 times. They didn't call them dinosaur. The word didn't exist until 1841. But as the population of people began to grow after the flood, the population of dragons began to go down. Nobody wants to live next door to a dragon. Hey, the same thing happened right here in Pensacola, Florida. How many grizzly bears are roaming around Escambia County right now? 0. How many were there 500 years ago, you think? Probably a lot of them, right? Well, what happened? You see, when people move into an area and civilize it, the big ferocious animals are driven off or killed off, right? If it came on the evening news tonight that there were 5 grizzly bears roaming around Escambia County, do you know what would happen by 6 o'clock in the morning? Every redneck in 3 counties would be out there with a rifle trying to shoot one. And whoever could shoot the biggest one would be the hero. They'd put his picture in the paper, you know, I shot the grizzly bear and saved the village. That's exactly what would happen. And that's what happened to the dragons. Man, if you could kill a dragon, you'd be a hero. And there are all sorts of stories of people killing these dragons. Gilgamesh is famous for slaying a dragon. Some Chinese guy named Yu surveyed the land of China. And according to the story, he built channels to drain the water off to the sea to make the land livable again. And many snakes and dragons were driven from the marshlands. Just, you got to drive the dragons off before you can, farm the lands, like it's part of the procedure. The Babylonian god Marduk is shown pictured here on top of a fire-breathing dragon. You say, now, Brother Hovind, you don't believe in fire-breathing dragons, do you? Well, yeah, I do. The Bible talks about a fiery flying serpent in Isaiah 14. There's an entire chapter in Job 41 about the fire-breathing dragon called Leviathan. Look what it says here. Out of his mouth go burning lamps and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils go a smoke. I've seen deacons do that. As out of a seething pot or cauldron, his breath kindleth coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth. There really was a fire-breathing dragon. We've got a whole videotape about that, an hour and a half long, on Leviathan, the fire-breathing dragon, in our topical series of tapes. But if you get a Catholic Bible, you'll find the book of Daniel has 2 extra chapters. This is part of what's called the apocryphal books, okay? It's not scripture, but it's interesting reading. In Daniel chapter 14, it says, there was a great dragon in the place, and the Babylonians worshipped him. And the king said to Daniel, behold, thou canst not say now that this is not a living God. Adore him, therefore. And Daniel said, I adore the Lord my God, for he is the living God. But that is no living God. But give me leave, O king. That means give me permission. And I will kill this dragon without sword or club. And the king said, I give thee leave. Then Daniel took pitch and fat and hair and boiled them together and made lumps and put them into the dragon's mouth, and the dragon burst asunder. What a strange story. Let me give you the Hovind translation of what's going on here. Okay? The Bible tells us Daniel was a man who understood science. Daniel knew full well that pitch is made from tree sap, and fat is salty tasting, and just about all animals like salty tasting things. That's why I put out salt blocks for the cows or the deer, right? And hair won't digest very well. So Daniel put them all together, made lumps, tossed them in. The dragon liked the taste because of the fat. He swallowed them, but because of the stickiness and the hair, they wouldn't digest. And they plugged up his intestinal tract. And these were the days before Roto-Rooter, and so he burst asunder. You figured out. When they found the original brick walls of the old city of Babylon from 2,600 years ago, they were very well preserved in the dry sand. They just excavated the walls and found carvings of dragons on them. How did they know about dragons in 600 BC? Well, there were probably some still alive. And apparently, Nebuchadnezzar had one in a cage. He had whatever else he wanted, He was an absolute dictator. But the ancient city of Babylon shows dragons all over these brick walls. Very interesting. Alexander the Great reported in 300 BC that his soldiers were scared by dragons when they conquered part of India. This Roman mosaic shows 2 long-necked dragons fighting. Or kissing. You can't tell what's happening for sure. Boy, that would be necking, wouldn't it? Wow. Anyway, how did the Romans know about dragons in the 2nd century after Christ? St. George is famous for slaying a dragon in 275 AD. Beowulf is famous for killing dragons. He was finally killed by a dragon when he was 88 years old. If you ever get the Beowulf story in Old English, good luck trying to read it. That's English, folks, from 1,500 years ago. Ma'am, you're from England. Can you read any of that? The Beowulf story, when they translate it to modern English, says, Beowulf killed Grendel the dragon by pulling off one of its arms, and the creature bled to death. What a strange story. Pulled off his arm. Well, most folks that study the T-Rex will tell you his front arms were pretty weak and puny. And I don't know if this was the dragon they're talking about or not, but probably if you could ever get a way to get a hold of it, you could probably jerk one of his arms off. Getting to it would be the tough part, but they did find the Babylonian cylinder seal showing a man pulling the arm off a dragon. Interesting. There are dragon legends from countries all over the world, especially in the water. Of course, they'd be the hardest ones to exterminate, of course. Ancient pottery, one of the oldest pieces of pottery in the world, for example, like this one from the 1st dynasty in Egypt, shows 2 long-necked dragons on this pottery. Well, this fellow says no human being's ever seen a dinosaur. Well, then why did they put them on their pottery? He doesn't know that nobody's ever seen one. He thinks nobody's ever seen one because he has never seen one. And because he was taught going through school that nobody's ever seen one, and he was crippled by his education, like a lot of kids are these days. Here's an ancient hippo tusk showing an animal with a long neck and a long tail. This is found in a tomb from the 12th century BC. Just about every country that has ancient roots has stories of dragons. There's a Thai seafood restaurant showing a dragon head on the animal. There's a Russian medallion showing a man slaying a dragon. There's a Bulgarian postage stamp with somebody killing a dragon. An Irish writer in 900 AD reported that someone killed a dragon with iron nails on its tail. There are many websites that deal with dragons. Most of them are from the, occult philosophy. But it's interesting, all the legends of dragons that have been found throughout the world. The Norwegians, my ancestors, used to put dragon heads on their ships. Why would they do that? Why are there so many legends about the Kraken, the great dragon of the sea, that the Norse Vikings talked about so much? Siegfried is famous for slaying the dragon Fafnir, famous Norwegian hero from 1,000 years ago. Marco Polo lived in China for 17 years. When he came back, he reported the emperor is raising dragons to pull chariots in his parades. Why would he say that? Well, I have a theory about that. I think he said that because the emperor was raising dragons to pull chariots in his parades. That's my theory. If you look at the old Chinese law books from 1611, that's when they appointed the post of royal dragon feeder. Why do you need a royal dragon feeder? To feed the dragon. Probably getting pretty rare by then, but I think there were few alive 400 years ago. A city in France was renamed to honor the man who slew the dragon. Nerluc, France. The Indians carved pictures of dinosaurs on the walls of the Grand Canyon. Dr. Delancey, he's dead now, but his widow still travels and speaks on creation up in Percy, Pennsylvania, took these photographs of the dinosaurs on the walls of the Grand Canyon. Interesting. They say nobody's ever seen one, huh? I don't think so. This article came out in 1924. I want you to look at this carefully. The fact that some prehistoric man made a pictograph of a dinosaur on the walls of this canyon upsets completely all of our theories regarding the antiquity of man. We upset their theory. Facts are stubborn and immutable things. If theories do not square with the facts, then the theories must change. The facts remain. About a year ago, a photograph of a dinosaur was shown to a scientist of national repute who was then specializing in dinosaurs. He said it is not a dinosaur, it is impossible because we know that dinosaurs were extinct 12 million years before man appeared on Earth. First, I'd like you to notice he said 12 million years, didn't he? Today's students are taught it is 65 million years before dinosaurs went extinct, right? You know, back in 1905, the textbooks say the Earth is 2 billion years old. In 1969, when they went to the moon, the textbooks told the kids the Earth is 3.5 billion years old. Today they're taught the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. In 1770, they taught the kids the Earth was 70,000 years old. Wow, the Earth is getting older at the rate of about 40 years per minute. Aging rapidly, folks. If you go to Blanding, Utah, you'll find carvings of dinosaurs on the canyon there in Blanding, Utah, right now, still there. Here's an Australian cave painting where somebody painted a picture of a dinosaur and a native running away from it on a cave in Australia. I can't pronounce the name of this lake in Canada, but there's a picture of what looks like a dinosaur to me, painted by the Indians on this cliff, on this island in Canada. He says no one's ever seen one. I don't think he knows that. He just thinks that. If you go to Ica, Peru, they've got the driest desert in the world down there. It's only rained once or twice in 400 years. Not a good place for a garden. When the Spanish came across that area in 1570s, they found white lines going across this desert. They said, obviously man-made lines. Why would somebody make this white line? It goes for miles across the desert. Nobody knew what these white lines were until they got airplanes. And they realized these are actually giant pictures. How many have ever heard of those before? They're called the Nazca lines down in Peru. Amazing. When they came across there in 1571, the Spanish found stones with strange animals carved on them. They'd never seen an animal like that, so they brought the stones back to the King of Spain and said, what are these? He said, I don't know. They're called the Nazca burial stones. I have 3 of them in my museum here in Pensacola. I have 2 of them on the table with me tonight. One is a replica. I have 3 originals, though. These Nazca burial stones that are found down there have dinosaurs and humans together. Of the thousands of stones that were found, about 500 contain dinosaurs and humans together. They show all sorts of things like heart surgery, brain surgery, strange things on these stones. Dr. Ball has two in Texas. Don Patton has one. Dennis Swift has two, I think, and we have three. There's only 15 in the whole United States. Three of them right here in Pensacola. Come on down and see our world-famous, small right now, but we're getting there, museum. We'll take over to Smithsonian here one day. Anton Willet's a friend of mine. He went down there and spent 8 months studying the Ica stones. Dennis Swift is a pastor in Oregon. He goes down there every year, talks to Dr. DeCara about these Ica stones. Notice most of the dinosaurs shown on these stones have circles on the side. Now, when you find dinosaur bones, that does not tell you what his skin looked like, does it? Why would they put circles on the side of the dinosaur? Just about all of them show that. One of our stones in our museum shows what apparently is a man cutting the head off a dinosaur, and apparently they're trying to depict that inside the dinosaur's stomach was another man who had been killed by the dinosaur. So his friend killed the dinosaur as vengeance. Very interesting story on some of these stones. And why did they put the circles on the skin? Well, nobody had ever found fossilized dinosaur skin until about 10 years ago, when a missionary in Bolivia found fossilized dinosaur skin. That missionary's sister lives in Milton, Florida. There's the phone number right there. Linda Mellon from Milton. They found this fossilized dinosaur skin. And guess what? There were circle patterns on the side. Now, how did they know to put circles on the sides of the dinosaurs if they hadn't seen a live one? Interesting. Here's a chief cutting the head off of one. Here's a fellow riding one. I'd be careful if I was going to do that. Ancient pottery sometimes shows dinosaurs. This one's from one of the tombs in Ica, Peru. One of the Indian mummies they found there in this tomb had a blanket wrapped around it. And all through the blanket they had woven pictures of dinosaurs. I'll blow it up for you so you can see it there. That's what they look like, woven all through that fabric. Dennis Swift has it in Oregon. I've held it in my hand, looked at it, just amazing. Down in Acamburo, Mexico. You're from Mexico, right, brother missionary? You ever been to Acamburo? You know where that's at? Go to Mexico City, turn right, go about an hour and a half. Middle of nowhere. You've been to Mexico City? Okay, thank you, sir. That's good. And you're his son. Okay, amen. In Acamburo, Mexico, they found 56,000 ceramic figurines of dinosaurs and people together. The people in the town are real quiet about it because it just really upsets all the theories about evolution. But John Turney's been down there many times studying the Acamburo figurines. They're telling us in school nobody's ever seen a dinosaur. Kids, don't you believe that for a second. An Italian peasant killed a dinosaur apparently in 1572. They had it mounted for a museum display. Smacked it on the head. Apparently it was a Tanistropheus. Roman swords were found in Tucson, Arizona. One of the swords has a dinosaur on it. I called the man who has the sword, Tom Peterson. There's his phone number. I said, Tom, what do you think about this sword? He said, well, it has to be fake because we know man and dinosaurs did not live at the same time. Does he know that or does he think that? He thinks that. He doesn't know that, does he? During the age of sailing ships, there are many stories of people sighting sea monsters. Missionary Hans Eged reported sighting a sea monster. A fellow came to me in church when I was speaking up in New England someplace, and he said, Mr. Hovind, my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is Hans Eged, and I have his diary. I thought, I would like to see this. He gave me copies of it. And he tells in that diary about him spotting a sea serpent. Very interesting, off the coast of Greenland. Here's the story that he said from the diary. As for other sea monsters, none of them have been seen by us or any of our time that I ever could hear, save the most dreadful monster that showed itself upon the surface of the water in the year 1734 off our new colony, that's Greenland, in 64 degrees. This monster was so huge in size that coming out of the water, its head reached as high as the masthead. Its body was as bulky as the ship and 3 or 4 times as long. It had a long pointed snout and spouted like a whalefish. Great broad paws, and the body seemed covered with shellwork. Its skin very rugged and uneven. The underpart of its body was shaped like a huge serpent, and it dived under the water. It plunged backward into the sea and so raised its tail aloft, which seemed a whole ship's length distant from the bulkiest part of its body. missionary to Norway, said he saw a sea serpent in 1755. On board the HMS Daedalus, Captain McKay said he and his crew watched as a 60-foot sea serpent swam under their boat. The sailors on board said, "Captain, please don't mention this in the logbook because we're going to get laughed at." Well, he put it in the logbook anyway, and he even got called in by the admiral. He said, "What are you doing talking about a sea serpent? Don't you know they don't exist?" He said, "Admiral, I saw it." He said, "It was so close, if it had been a man of mine acquaintance, I could have recognized him easily." That was his story. During the 1850s, the whaling ship Monongahela set sail to go catch whales, and instead they killed a sea serpent, 103 feet 6 inches long. It had 4 swim fins, an alligator-like head, and 94 very sharp teeth. Another ship stopped to see what they were working on, and they saw them cutting up this giant sea serpent. The folks on the Monongahela said, "Look, you've heard about sea serpents? You've heard sailors get laughed at? Come take a look. Here's one right here. We killed it." The other shoe bought the sea serpent oil off of them and sailed back to port to tell the story. The captain of the Monongahela said, "We're going to go catch a few whales. We'll be back in a few months." Well, the Monongahela never showed up. Apparently it got sank in a storm. The officer on board the Campania, Arthur Henry Ralston, who later helped rescue the folks on the Titanic, by the way, he said he sighted off the coast of Cork, Ireland, a long-necked object which he sketched as it moved, turning its head from side to side. He stated that what he saw was a sea serpent. Now, this book is called Titanic, Triumph and Tragedy. I want you to look at the next sentence in the book. The author said, "However imaginative the young officer may have been." Do you see any prejudice in that statement? You know, like if you claim you saw a sea serpent, we know you're a little bit, loco a la cabeza, right? A little crazy. A German submarine commander sank a British ship during World War I, and he said when it exploded underwater, a giant 60-foot animal came flying up out of the water. There are stories of octopus actually pulling ships underwater. You say, "Come on, octopus never get that big." Oh, they get pretty big. This one washed up on the beach in St. Augustine, Florida, 100 years ago. The octopus was 200 feet across and weighed 5 tons. That's a big octopus. A whale was killed near Seattle, Washington. Inside the whale's stomach was one arm to an octopus. It was 150 feet long. See, whales love to eat octopus. And if a whale eats too much octopus, he'll get sick and puke it back up. And if you ever see a piece of puked up octopus floating around in the ocean, be sure to grab it. It's worth a lot of money. Does anybody know what they make out of puked up octopus? Yes? Oil? Perfume. That explains a few things, doesn't it, fellas? Hey, dear, you smell like a puked up octopus. You know, whales love to eat octopus and squid, but octopus and squid never stop growing. There have been some awfully big squid seen out there in the ocean. A Navy research vessel saw a giant squid attacking a giant whale in 1966 off the coast of Newfoundland. At Yale University, they've got the model of a giant squid hanging over my head there, Peabody Museum. This baby giant squid washed up on the beach in New Zealand. They said full grown it would have been 150 feet long. That's a big squid. People say, now wait a minute, if dinosaurs always lived with man, like you're saying, why aren't they mentioned in the Bible? Well, they are. Dinosaurs are in the Bible. Now, the word dinosaur isn't used. That word wasn't made up till later, but they're called other names, which I'll show you. If you get the book of Job, the book of Job has 42 chapters. In the first 2 chapters, it says Job was a perfect man. He feared God and hated evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And in Job chapter 38, the Lord answered Job out of a whirlwind. Boy, if a tornado starts talking to me, I'm going to pay attention. And the Lord said, who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? We come to chapter 40. And God said, behold now behemoth. Now what on earth is a behemoth? Some reference Bibles say it must be the elephant or hippopotamus. No, it cannot be either of those, okay? I believe behemoth is the long-necked dinosaur, probably the Brachiosaurus. There are actually 13 different long-necked dinosaurs: the brachiosaur, the cetosaur, mamenchosaur, the seismosaur, the blondosaurus. You just have to talk to her kind of slow, okay? But God said, behold now, behemoth eats grass as an ox. You say, now, Brother Hovind, elephants eat grass, and my Bible says elephant. Well, a lot of animals eat grass, okay? Look at the next verse. His strength is in his loins, his force is in the navel of his belly. The biggest part on him is his belly. You say, well, elephants have a big belly. Yep, I've seen them. Hippopotamus have a big belly. I've seen them too. Brachiosaurus has a big belly. He has a big belly. Next verse says, he moveth his tail like a cedar. His tail is like a cedar tree. Have you ever seen an elephant's tail? Not like a cedar tree, is it? How about a hippo tail? Not like a cedar tree. You know, before they put those comments about the Bible in the Bible, they ought to at least read it. Don't you think, brother? Before they put a comment about it, they ought at least read it once. You know, it can't be an elephant hippopotamus. They don't have a tail like a cedar tree. I mean, come on. It has to be something like the brachiosaurus. Now, that would have a tail like a cedar tree. Next verse says, his bones are as strong pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. They had big, heavy-duty bones. I have a toe bone in my museum. You can come by and see a real toe bone from a brachiosaurus. Now, kids, this is going to be complicated, so listen carefully. Those little bones in his toe, like you have 3 bones in your finger, what I have is the second phalange, second toe bone of a dinosaur. Now, the reason they had those big toe bones is because he had big toes. How many can figure that out with no help? He had those big toes because he had a big foot. There's a kid taking a bath in a dinosaur footprint. Pictures on the back of the book right here on the table. He had that big foot because he had a big leg to hold up. Their front leg is 20 feet tall. You know, the biggest dinosaur ever found was found in Oklahoma. It was 60 feet tall. They say the biggest one, when it was alive, probably weighed about 100 tons. That's equal to 14 school buses put together. That means if he was to come by and step on you, you would be deeply impressed by him. I don't know if it'd be impressed or depressed. Maybe I can get an English teacher to help me out with that one. Or both, okay? You'd be road pizza when he got done, right? Job 40:19 says, he is the chief of the ways of God. The chief. That's the Hebrew word resheth. He's the chief. He's the principal. He's the beginning. He's the biggest animal God ever made. Well, that would not be the elephant hippopotamus. It'd be the brachiosaurus. But he's the chief of the ways of God. And God created the great animals, the great whales, the living creatures. God made the dinosaurs. And Satan said, you know, there has to be some way I can use dinosaurs against God. But the devil couldn't fool Adam. You kidding? Adam named him. Can you imagine the devil coming to Adam saying, hey, Adam, did you know dinosaurs lived millions of years ago? Adam would say, are you dumb or what? There's one in the backyard eating off my cherry tree right now. The devil couldn't fool Noah, not with dinosaurs. Noah fed him every morning. But for the next 4,000 years, most of them were killed off or died off. And by the early 1800s, when they found the bones and started putting them together in museums, the devil said, here's my chance. Everybody has forgotten about dinosaurs. You know, out of sight, out of mind. And the devil said, I think I'm going to tell these people that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. And if they believe it, it'll make them doubt the Bible. And boy, has it worked well for the last 200 years. You know, boys and girls go to kindergarten and they get a book that says, boys and girls, we can read about dinosaurs. Would anyone like to take just a wild guess at what the first sentence in the book says? Millions of years ago. How did you know? You're 8 years old. And you knew it too, okay? And you're only 5 years old, right? Why do all the dinosaur books start off, you know, millions of years ago? You think there's any books like this in the library in your public school? How about the public library? You think the kids are going to face this type of teaching on TV? Discovery Channel? Animal Kingdom? Animal World? Millions of years ago. How many kids are being taught that in your town at your expense? I go to museums all the time. And I just get sick and tired of all the kids going through these museums, seeing these little signs, you know, 70 million years ago, dinosaurs roamed the earth. It's about time somebody gets interested in reaching these kids with the truth. And some of you ought to quit worrying about knocking that stupid ball into the hole in the dirt and start worrying about what the kids are being taught. And get yourself some tracts or some videotapes or something and go out and stand at these museums and give these kids the truth about dinosaurs. Because there are thousands and thousands of kids in Pensacola who believe dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. And they don't realize it yet. But that's going to cause them to really question any belief in the Bible for all of their life. Satan starts kids when they're 3 years old with dinosaurs. I spoke at a public school one time to 300 first graders. Try that sometime. I had all these kids in the room and I said, boys and girls, when did dinosaurs live? Instantly, all of them shouted out, millions of years ago. These kids can barely read. How do they know this already? And why aren't the Christians getting their message across? Next verse here and we'll quit. The Bible says, he lieth under the shady trees in the covert of the reed and fens. The word fens is the Old English word that means the swamp. Behemoth lives in the swamp. Did you know the largest swamp in the world is in the middle of Africa? It is 55,000 square miles. There's what it looks like next to the United States. Africa's huge. You kids are going to be taught that all the continents used to fit together. Pangea, that is baloney. They shrank Africa 35 or 40% to make them fit. They do not fit together. We covered that on video number 6. But this swamp in Africa is 80% unexplored today. Did you know there have been about 30 expeditions into that swamp in the last 20 years? They all come back saying there are dinosaurs still alive. Small ones, probably the Apatosaurus or Cetosaurus, like this one. If you show this to the natives that live in the swamp, they'll say, yep, that's Mokele Mbembe. He still lives in the swamp. They're not as big as they used to be, and certainly not very plentiful. We cover more on that in the next session about dinosaurs that are still alive. There have been an amazing number of sightings of dinosaurs still alive in this century. Actually, over 20,000 reported sightings of dinosaurs. People are just afraid to say what they've seen because of the teachings that dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. Dead one washed up on the beach in California in 1925. The neck was 20 feet long. One atheist wrote me a letter and said, Hovind, you're so stupid. Don't you know that was a whale? Just exactly where is the neck on a whale? Please show that to me. We'll cover lots more on dinosaurs still living in the next session. Thank you so much.